What's going on, everyone? Linkature64 here, and if you've been following some more non-Nintendo video game news recently, Crash Bandicoot: The Insane Trilogy came out recently, and what this game is it's basically a remastered version of the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy. And despite my disappointment not coming to Switch, seriously, that would be amazing. Despite that, the game has been getting amazing reviews, and it got me thinking, what other games would be awesome to be remastered in HD? Especially in, like, the Nintendo world of games. I bet you that there are a ton. So, after thinking for a while, I came up with 5 games that would be absolutely amazing to be remastered and put on Switch. So let's get started. Number 1, The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. So when Skyward Sword first came out, it generally was given somewhat mixed reviews. And when people talk about it now, it really isn't with much positivity. Sure, Skyward Sword suffer from a somewhat obvious and linear design, but the storytelling in it is some of the best in the Zelda series. If you think about it, Skyward Sword is actually the only 3D Zelda game that hasn't been remade in either HD or 3D, so I think it only makes sense that Nintendo will come around to upping the visual style. There is one thing holding Nintendo back from making an HD Skyward Sword, though. Breath of the Wild came out recently, and it completely changed the entire Zelda formula, in a good way. To come out with a re-release of an quote-unquote old Zelda game would feel kind of weird after Breath of the Wild already rewrote the entire system. But I think that if you give it a couple years, the community might be more open to the idea. I think that's the time when Nintendo will finish remaking the 3D Zeldas and remaster Skyward Sword. Number 2, Super Mario Sunshine. Okay, so I realize that I'm treading on thin ice here, but hear me out. While Mario Sunshine is probably the most divisive Mario game of all time, it can't be denied that it did have some strong points, namely in its sandbox design. While the design of Sunshine is not as smooth as Super Mario 64's was, it still held its own, and to this day many Mario fans, although not all of them, still find themselves enjoying Mario Sunshine. But this game has the graphics of a GameCube game, and it shows. Big time. An HD remake with a few polishes around the corners might be enough to get those who didn't like Sunshine the first time to give it a second chance. Number 3, Star Fox 64. It's pretty much unanimous that Star Fox 64 is the best game in its series. It's one of the highlights of the entire Nintendo 64's lineup of games, and its controls were really forward-thinking whenever it first came out. But you know something? Looking at this game nowadays is hard. I mean, you have to expect that from one of Nintendo's very first 3D games, but regardless, the early 3D graphics seem kind of choppy by today's standards. Sure, Star Fox 64 3D on the 3DS did a decent job bringing the game into more modern context, but I think it would be even better if they could update the models of the aircraft and various enemies in the game with HD graphics, and maybe even updated the control scheme a bit. This would be an amazing game for Nintendo to announce, especially coming off the heels of Star Fox Zero, which, let's face it, kind of flopped. Besides that, if Nintendo released this remake right whenever the SNES Classic and Star Fox 2 came out, both Nintendo and Star Fox fans would go absolutely crazy. Number 4, the Metroid Prime Trilogy. Okay, Metroid Prime is Nintendo's only first-person shooter. In a world where FPSs absolutely dominate the American market, that is incredibly unique. If you look at any of the other consoles on the market, it's very easy to tell that they make a lot of first-person shooters, and that they sell very well. But Nintendo? Nah. They'll make platformers and puzzle games and strategy games and RPGs and all sorts of other genres, but you almost never see them overuse any of these genres. That's really what makes Metroid Prime stand out. It's the unique FPS in a world of non-FPS Nintendo games. That's why Metroid Prime is so popular. And that's why an HD remake of these 3 games would make so much sense. And you know what would be even more awesome? If they released this remake of the trilogy alongside Metroid Prime 4, whenever that comes out. Wouldn't it be incredible to buy a collector's edition of Prime 4 that comes with all 4 games? It might be a pipe dream, but then again, not too long ago we were all thinking that wishing for both a 2D Metroid and Metroid Prime was a pipe dream. And that actually ended up happening. So dream big. Finally, number 5, Super Mario 64. Alright, all the other games on this list would be awesome to see in HD, but this is the big one. Mario 64 is one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, and for good reason. Obviously, it was the very first 3D Mario, and it absolutely nailed its sandbox design. The way that stars were tucked into each level was nothing short of brilliant. Now, I know that I'm going to trigger a few people here, but I think that Mario 64 does have one flaw: the camera. I realize that a lot of people who grew up with the game don't have any issues with controlling Mario 64's camera. And that's good for you if that's the case. But, put simply, the camera controls of Mario 64 definitely pale in comparison to modern games. So much so that it's hard to go back to. Or at least for me. So I think that if they remade Mario 64 with HD graphics, smoothed out the camera controls, and maybe even edited out some of the rough edges of Mario's movement, it would be an absolutely perfect game. Well, those are 5 games that would look absolutely awesome if they were remade on the Switch with HD graphics. So what do you guys think? Were there any of the games on this list that you would have swapped out with a different game? Or are there any other games that you just simply don't agree with that shouldn't be ported, that should just stay classic? Let me know down in the comments. I love interacting with you guys, and this is something I really want to talk about. Anyways, guys, if you're new to the channel, I talk about everything Nintendo, Nintendo Switch, N64, everything Nintendo. And you can subscribe to my channel up here and check out my latest video up here. Hey, and by the way, be prepared for some more Splatoon 2 coverage coming your way. I just picked that up recently, and I'm looking forward to having a blast to it and making a video on it soon. So anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one.